today. So let's get going. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're happy to be back with you for the latest installment in our supply chain chat series. We have been doing this series for most of 2025, and it's just a great way to bring our algo experts together and talk about, hot topics at hand and what we see in our business and dealing with our customers and sort of everything within demand planning and inventory management in the supply chain ecosystem. So our topic today is an exciting one and one that many of our customers and prospects can relate to, and that is data readiness and how to build a foundation for AI-driven demand planning. We really do know the struggle that faces demand planning teams in dealing with their many data sources and the overall cleanliness of their inventory data. So let's get started on this topic and jump right in. So today we have joining us Samuel Parker and Tom Bond to help me answer the question, how can companies build a strong foundation for demand planning? Guys, thanks for being with me today. How about we get your introductions out of the way? Samuel, why don't you start?
Yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for spending time with us today. I'm the Vice President of Product here at Algo. My team focuses on the delivery of our demand planning, demand forecasting, and S&OP solutions. I've spent the last decade in manufacturing and supply chain with stints at a variety of enterprise software companies delivering supply chain solutions.
Awesome. And I'm Tom Bond. I'm the VP of Implementation here at Algo. Been with Algo going on 10 years now, and pretty much headed up all our implementations now since day one. So a lot of history there. We partner with organizations every day who are really trying to better forecast, starting with getting cleaner data and just reduce the noise throughout the whole process. And being the VP of implementation, myself and my team are kind of your front line of defense in all this. We're the first ones that start the kickoffs and start to learn your business and really dive in to help you understand what we need to do with that data so that we can better your process moving forward.
And I think that's really critical for our focus today. It's not just the more advanced practices around forecasting, but it's the foundation beneath it, which is the data that powers all of that planning. And that's the punchline we see over and over again is AI is famously garbage in, garbage out. So it doesn't work until your data does. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today.
Awesome. So I'm going to jump in the first topic here, really what we mean by data readiness. What does that truly mean? It's not just, clean spreadsheets, which a lot of people are using today through all our discovery. We're really talking about, is the data complete across all systems, all your ERP systems, other systems you may use internally, like a NetSuite and SAP. Can you connect the dots between all that data? Is your promotional data living in one system and all your mastery data in another system? How do those connect? How do we pull those all together in one place to get the foundation to move forward? Is it accessible in real time or near real time, or is there a big delay in that data, which we'll talk a little bit about in some examples moving forward? Is it structured in a way that aligns with your business knowledge today? So what you're trying to do from a logical planning perspective is that data structure to help you do that. And when I speak to that, I'm talking more in the realm of hierarchies is a good example. So are you having to look at it very granular at each individual SKU, very time consuming, taking up a lot of your internal team's time? Or do you have structured data in the point where you can roll it up and you can focus on anomalies and really dive into what needs the attention and let good systems drive the rest of the business? And I think the most important one, does your internal team trust the data? That's one of the biggest things we've been hearing over the last few years. Not sure if I can trust this data internally. Not sure if it's updated correctly. So does the internal team trust it? And are they good moving forward with using that in their planning processes?
And I think that's something, we've seen time and time again, especially in organizations where historically data cleanliness, data hygiene is known to be an issue. How far can you trust a forecast? How far can you trust a demand plan if you don't trust the inputs? And, I think that's a lot of where we want to spend our time on today.
Right. Okay. And I did just want to mention, sorry, I should have said this at the beginning. If you have any questions during the webinar or something pops in your mind, please do feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll address it while we're here all together. So with that said, how about we shift to what this looks like in real life for our customers? Tom, how does this typically translate in reality?
Yeah, and I think during this little segment, we're talking really towards some of the common data challenges we encounter with our customer base and what we're seeing up front. One of the big ones, just the clients or customers we're working with are working across multiple different systems and trying to pull it all to one area. They're still working on multiple tabs throughout Excel. As part of my implementations team practice, we get in and we really run some thorough discovery sessions to understand what your data looks like, but also what your planning processes look like. And 9 times out of 10 during those sessions, when we're discovering, the customer's pulling up a spreadsheet with 20 tabs on it with different data sources to try and bring it to one spot. So that's one of the biggest challenges we see today. My spreadsheet's clocking. It's timing out. So how do we get all that in one place where you can use a good system to drive that heavy lift and you can focus on what needs to be focused on in the business? One I talked about earlier, the hierarchy-based planning. So a lot of times when we get in these discovery sessions, we notice that the item or location mastery data is not set up in a way where you can build a good hierarchy structure around your planning process. So give an example in a electronics industry. No one wants to spend the time planning for 2,000 individual SKUs, but maybe you can plan for a set of controllers for Xbox or a set of headsets for a certain system. And how is the hierarchy set up in the mastery data so that you can roll that up and you can really plan at that level, but then using tools that Algo has and the system Algo has, it can call out those anomalies and give you those easy wins to go look at that specific data and use the hierarchy to roll everything up and keep the planning process going and really reduce the amount of manual effort and time that is spent during this planning. And then this is probably the biggest one I've faced recently in this mid-market area, is just the visibility to these promotional events. What is the retailer running? Where can you get that information? Algo helps with that. So how do we jump in? How do we help you understand where you can get that data if it's visible? And how can we get it mapped into our system so we can accurately help the AI engine forecast moving forward on what those promotional events may be? And then just the last one here I'm going to speak to is just lagging data feeds. It's a big one we see. Big lags in the data from your inventory data, potentially your POS data. We have a few examples we'll talk about in a few minutes here of how we've kind of helped some customers speed up some of that lag in data and get more true time data, especially when you get closer to those planning periods that are super important, like your Black Friday, your holiday periods. How do you get your hands on that data quicker?
And I think the reality that we see kind of all of these challenges translating to is just an increase in the manual effort it takes to curate your data, to curate any sort of plan or forecast. One team that we worked with had to rebuild their forecast weekly from scratch because nothing synced between their point of sale, their ERP, their supply planning, even just reconciling definitions of things like units sold versus units shipped. And we see that eating up, entire headcounts in some of these smaller organizations where they really can't afford it.
Yeah. And I think, Samuel, the reality here with everything we're discussing, it's really not a you problem. This is truly just a natural byproduct in the industry of natural growth internally, mergers and acquisitions between our customer base, internal resource constraints, like where do you need to focus, that crawl, walk, run approach. So here at Algo, our job is to really help team navigate these waters, not blow up your entire tech stack, and help you really focus on what's going to drive the needle.
Yeah, and I think, one of the themes, I'm hearing too as we're chatting about all this is just the need of our customers to just alleviate these manual processes and just ensure that the data sources they have and the data sets that we're working with can just be, managed and manipulated in the most automated way going forward, right? So, okay, so let's talk about what this translates to for the mid-market size companies out there. Many of our customers are in this space. So is it different for them, Samuel? How's it go?
Yeah, I mean, in my background, I came from working with extremely large enterprises who have massive dedicated teams for all these operations, right? They have headcount in place to help with all of the analytics, all the curation, and most of the companies we work with today are not, Unilever, they're not Walmart, and so the playbook here is to really start small and help them understand where those quick wins lie, where the biggest problem points are in their data sets, and really ultimately reduce the lift on these internal teams who aren't staffed to handle this type of manual effort, or if they are staffed to handle that type of manual effort, it's consuming all of their time.
Yeah, I think on top of that, Samuel, that's why here at Algo, we've seen our forecasting model kind of get that traction. It really helps, to your point, the internal teams not having to be the AI experts, not have to necessarily be the forecasting experts, not having to be the data experts, focusing on what matters. At Algo, our goal is to curate the data for you through all the process we've already spoken to. We build out the models, bringing in the necessary historical data, not just to look forward, but what has happened historically. Where do we need to focus? Our data scientists jump deep into your data once we map it through the implementation process to really build out these models that are going to help the AI engine produce the best outcome move forward. And then Algo owns the output, right? And the good part about that is you just get to work with the output. So when that output comes out of our engine and in our tools, it's in a system where you guys just get to play with it. You get to work with it. You can make changes to it, but we own what comes out of that engine, and we're constantly iterating it. So what's coming up in market trends? How do we help train our model more? How do we better the forecast moving forward? What is the current trend? What is our accuracy? We're constantly looking at it. It's not just to set it and forget it.
And I think, what it comes down to really at the base level as we talk about data readiness is the fastest wins that we see when we start engaging with a new company. It comes from data alignment, right? It's not fancy algorithms. It's not data science modeling. We get to that later on, but we can see 10 to 20% improvements in accuracy with customers just from better internal alignment and doing things like deduping data for customers before we even start to layer in something like the forecasting or the modeling.
Right. Okay. So let's now sort of get into talking about some real customer examples. This is always helpful for our webinar attendees to really understand, the challenges that we've seen over the years with our customers and how they navigate those. So, Tom, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. So real life examples, a few different customers that we've worked with here at Algo over the past few years, like Karen said, starting with a customer in the CPG industry that we worked with. And I'm going to go right back to when I said I had an example over the promotional situation later on. This customer, working with a pretty big retail based client, didn't have access to the promotional information that they were running. They couldn't get their hands on it. They didn't know when promotions were going to pop up. Historically, they would see in the data, and Algo could tell based on the data that there was likely a promotional during that time, a promotion that was running, not a seasonal event. Had to be driven by a certain promotion. Something happened to really cause a spike in that data. but the client or the customer did not have access to that. So when you're ingesting that data and trying to help train a model, it's called out as an anomaly, but there's no data telling it it's actually an anomaly. So how can we crawl, walk, run that phase? And how do we do it with this client? So, we started with, let's get one win. So when you're running promotions out in the industry, you have promotions on individual products, you have promotion on bundle sets, you have promotions on big shipper corrugates that might be shipped in one time, sit on the floor, sold, cardboard's thrown away. Can we get our hands on working with this retailer? Can we get our hands on just the corrugate based information that really increases sales and get a big uptick for a small period of time that is not going to be repeatable moving forward? So we started there, but the big example that we saw is and we're seeing it through multiple clients, is really not having that direct relationship with the retailer to get this information. So Algo comes and helps through our experience over the years and working with other clients on the right levers to pull, the right people to talk to, and where to start. You can't get it all at once. So what's going to make the biggest impact up front to drive a better and closer forecast moving forward? Another example we had, and this client's in food and bev industry with very small shelf life, and products that expire after just a few days. And this specific client was slightly immature with the data set that they were able to get their hands on in regard to not even getting actual sales or POS based data downstream. So not even knowing what's selling and really forecasting based on historical shipments that have went in, minus spoilage that is coming back. But not having that data point, so really just focusing on the shipment. So how could Algo make a quick win there, to Samuel's point early, that those quick wins that we can get out of the gate that don't take long to get to? So Algo coming in, and with the data that we had to work with this client, coming in and understanding what data do you have, how can we quickly look at this data to give you a couple quick wins? And what we did was we took that shipment history from the past, the returns data that's coming back, and did an effort to understand, can we back into a sales number based on what was returned, what was shipped, here's likely what you sold, close to the pin. That's where we started. That was the quick, let's get you a sales number and let's store that historically in Algo and go backwards with that data so we can start putting some models together off of that data point. So that was number one. Then let's look at these returns. Are they accurate? Is the field service team really scanning the product out correctly and bringing the data back to this customer correctly? And the answer was no. So Algo looking at this based on when returns were coming back and when they were scanned out, it wasn't possible based on the shelf life. So giving data insight into what can you bring to your field service team out in the field that are actually at the retailers as data inputs to get better data back to then improve the forecast moving forward. And that was, hey, you guys are scanning out these returns against the wrong invoice that went out, and you're causing it to look like more was returned on future product than previous shipments, which was throwing off that POS calculation. So there's just another very specific example of Algo got in, really helped understand your data and drove some quick wins. We don't stop there, right? We're still iterating as we move forward, but let's get some quick wins that move the needle a little bit. And then the third example, this is actually a lot of our customers in that mid-market area, but we do have some fairly large customers out there at Algo. And this is one of our large customers that through EDI feeds with one of their major retailers that they work with, they were experienced, back to one of my earlier points of what we see a lot, they were experienced 5 to 7 days delay in EDI feeds on their sales-based data. Algo has experience with API and setting up API feeds for our current clients. And one of the things we knew with this major retailer is that their API feeds, although still slightly delayed, were much better than the 5 to 7 days delay. So Algo approached this, did some research into this retailer on what this current customer could get their hands on, and did a full global effort of rolling out API to replace EDI of the data moving forward, so that that lag is not there and you're not a week behind consistently on your sales volume, so that you can forecast more accurately and closer to the pin on real-time data or close to real-time data. And that can obviously significantly impact that forecast model. So there's just a few examples of real customer examples that Algo's worked with, on problems that they've faced and kind of where Algo has jumped in on those specific problems. And it's not just out of the gate. Some of these examples were discovered during our implementation discovery sessions, and some of these examples really came to light further downstream, even a year or so after we implemented this customer, because we're consistently looking and owning the output and consistently looking to get some ROI for our customer, that's working with Algo.
Those are great examples. And, I think where this really comes to light is as companies are standing up S&OP, right? They're trying to do sales and operations planning. They're trying to create a higher degree of maturity in their business planning or business forecasting. And, any company out there that's ever had M&A activity or divested certain divisions or, acquired another company, you're getting disparate systems, you're getting legacy data. One particular example that stuck out to me was a large convenience store retailer that I've worked with in the past who the way that they defined on time and full being delivered in their TMS was if the delivery truck made it to the first distribution drop off, right? So if they made it on time to the first store, then that delivery was on time and in full, and the 6 stops after that completely unaccounted for. And when you're trying to reconcile that sort of performance data from a legacy acquisition with maybe the way that on time and in full is defined in your own ERP, that's where we start to come in and see these massive discrepancies that lead to lack of trust around how these demand planning and operations processes are involved. So we've talked about the problems, we've talked about the challenges, and there are many more. I'm sure we could probably spend the whole session on it. But let's talk a little bit about what good looks like, for us when we come into a client. So I'll break it down into a pretty simple 4-part framework. And this is how we start to assess data readiness. As Tom said, his team's the first ones through the door. What are they looking at? So accuracy is number 1, which is the data correct and reflective of the current state? Are things being logged appropriately in the systems? Are you actually collecting data as it comes in from various ingestion points? Completeness, which is, are all the required signals represented? Do you have sales data? Do you have promo data? Do you have inventory data? If you do, is it reflected across, all of your locations? Is it reflected across all of your channels? Timeliness would be number 3, which is, can you run a forecast on Monday with data from last week? Maybe that's not your goal if you're not in a perishable, in a non-perishable goods space, but can you run a forecast on Monday with data from last month and do so with, a degree of confidence, right? And then finally, accessibility. And that's really around the forecast component, which is, can your planners and the forecasting engine see the same data, right? So is that data accessible to every key system that's running across your integrated business planning process? So those are the 4 things that we start to look at least initially, when we engage, right out of the gate with a customer.
Thanks, Samuel. Yeah, and I think that's a good transition point to address how Team Algo really helps our customers' demand planning teams get there, right? So in terms of best practices with their data prep and process, what does that look like? And Tom, over to you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. So from a best practice perspective, this is really what my team does. And before I jump into it, we're iterating all the time also, right? We feel we have a great practice already, but we're building on that practice after each customer that we work with when we learn. And we're bettering ourselves also as we go through this. We're doing discovery on our own processes throughout all these implementation practices. And what we do is, right now, we break it into 3 main parts. So first being discovery and prioritizing. So my team jumps in, and there's actually, a pre-kickoff to all this. So before we really kick off the project, we do a pre-kickoff where we just lay the foundation. We give you some examples. We bring full data mapping templates forward that are calling out the individual files that are needed to be gathered from all these other systems, all the ERPs, NetSuites of the world, and what is mandatory to run these AI forecasting models and to run the DPIP systems. So called out as necessary, called out as nice to have. My team brings that to the table before the actual kickoff, and we just have a light discovery session to walk through that and hand it off to the customer team to say, hey, over the next 2 weeks or so before we do our main kickoff, why don't you take a look at this, start gathering some of the data together, so when we go for that main kickoff, we can hit the ground running. So what we do is what data matters the most, and we help you understand that. We prioritize that, and we get that running first. And so that discovery time on the data and prioritizing what is mandatory versus what is nice to have is a real big step one to the process. Next is normalizing it, fixing the structure, going through the full data mapping exercise. And this isn't just, hey, jump offline and you guys do it yourself, right? We have, depending on the customer, what they can put forward from a timing perspective to work with Algo. We usually have 3 sessions a week during these implementation sessions when we kick off, to discover everything that you have internally, but then help you fix it, help you clean it. So we're on those calls 3 days a week. My team's walking through all the structure of the data. We're walking through the item, the location, the date, calendar hierarchy needs, and best practices of what we've seen in the industry and what we've seen throughout our full customer base to help you guys move forward. So how do we fix that structure of what you currently have? How can we help you fix it through those best practices? So that's where we're normalizing it, and then operationalize it. So we've went through this full process to discover what's going on. We've helped fix it all. Now let's operationalize it and bring it into Algo. So building those connectors and pipelines so that everything can be automated is the next step to this process, so that tools can ingest all this great data that we went through the process of mapping and building with your team. And this is through, we can direct face off with our customer, or we can help face off with your customer also. So direct connections into the major retailers of the world is something that Algo is capable of doing and can help do. So operationalizing that, building those pipelines and automating it to take away the need to manually load spreadsheets and systems or manually pull data from retailer systems to then just load it back into a system. So that's really where we break it down into those 3 main parts. And, to talk about kind of another real world example and how we can help better a process through that whole discovery and those 3 steps that I just talked to. One of our more recent customers that we worked with, through this discovery process, it was identified that, which is completely fine in the mid-market area, and we see it a lot. It was identified that through this discovery, even with their largest retailer that took up about 60 to 70% of their business, they were forecasting purely on a shipment-based model, what we've shipped out to them before. But there's a lot of good data through the discovery and through these sessions that we had with the customer that you can get from this retailer to really try and pinpoint what is that retailer selling? What are they doing with your data? Try and get closer to the pin. Try and reduce returns that may come back. And so through that discovery session, we were able to work with the customer, and they were able to develop API feeds to bring that good data in from this retail client, save it on their end, get into their ERP system. And now we're mapping it into Algo's system so we can do what we call a best-in-class DPIP practice solution, where you're taking, downstream POS, you're forecasting off of that downstream POS, promotions, all that good quality data in the AI engine, and anything else that we can pull in from 3P based data also. And then you're bringing that upstream and you're saying, okay, let me use the inventory data also from them, not just historical shipments. What's their inventory data now? And so we completely transformed their A to Z process on 60% of their business through one retail client. And I think it goes right back to spending that time up front to really discover what is your business model today. Let us make some suggestions. If those are suggestions we can roll with, awesome. Let's roll with them. Let's help you map them. Let's help get that data in. And let's see if we can move that lever just a little bit downstream. And I think I mentioned earlier, but we don't just do this in the upfront implementation, right? Like my team goes through the full implementation, goes through this full data mapping exercise, but we're constantly looking at data. And my team does a thorough handoff to an internal customer success team at Algo. And then that customer success team is consistently looking for more wins for you to help you better your model, to help you better the data that you're getting. And so just another quick example of an existing client we've actually had for multiple years within Algo. Just recently, through a DPIP exercise, looking at their data with the customer success team, it was discovered that there was what looked to be, in our models calling out these anomalies, looked to be multiple situations where promotions were running at this specific retailer that weren't in the promotional feed we've received for years from this client, throwing off the data model and causing these anomalies to be flagged in our tool. And so what we did was we determined that here's a promotion we believe is there. It's not in your feed. Is it available on this retailer's site? The answer was yes. And so now we're completely, even after 10 years of work with this client, transforming the way we're getting their promotional information, because it looks to be that it's better in this new API way of getting it from a different tool. So we can make our model better moving forward, ensure we have the right data going in to get a better outcome in the end. So those are just two life examples of newer client through the discovery implementation phase, but also existing client through our customer success team, all revolved around data and how we're consistently looking to better that experience.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. I think that just really helps paint a picture for everybody, when we look at what it really translates to for our customers and their businesses. So why don't we just shift to a segment that we all love, which you've touched on some of them before, quick wins and getting started. And our customers always ask, how do we start? Where do we start? What do we do? So Samuel, give us some tips or recommendations.
Yeah. So, I would recommend, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, looking at where the largest capacity constraints are within your internal organization or within your team, right? If you have someone who's spending 20 hours a week curating manual spreadsheets for certain inventory lines or business units, where is the bulk of your data reporting or data efficacy challenges coming from? So start with 1 to 2 critical product lines, 1 to 2 critical business units, and start identifying the data sources that drive the forecast value. And what I mean by that is, where are the largest data ingestion points coming from when you're trying to put together a plan for your business? For most people, it's probably an ERP, right? Inventory or order management software, something of that nature. For other folks, depending on your business model, it could be your distribution center, your warehouse management software. We kind of see it all across the board, depending on the business model, retail or not. So once you've identified kind of the critical business lines and the data sources, get a baseline on your current performance, right? If you look back, partner with your FP&A team, how well have you done adhering to forecast over the last few quarters? And for everybody, it's different. I mean, some people just ask their sales team how much they think they're going to sell, and that becomes the forecast, right? Some people do use algorithms. Some people use historical performance, right? So take a look and start to figure out, okay, what is my forecast error? How much manual effort is going into all of this? And ultimately, what is my cycle time to create a forecast, depending on, kind of those top 3 things above. What we typically then recommend is to run a pilot, and we have an offering called demand forecasting as a service, which is essentially a managed forecast that gives you then sort of an initial pilot benchmark to compare against your historical forecast performance.
Yeah, that's great, Samuel. And I think, based on that and based on some of the things Algo can do, we've seen a lot of teams and customers of ours get that value within 6 to 8 weeks, not 6 to 8 months. Algo's here to try and move swiftly and help work with you. And I think that's what mid-market companies really need. Fast time to that insight, fast time to some of that ROI. No one wants to sit for a year doing a full-blown software implementation. So that fast time to insight is what Algo's truly looking for, and seeing some wins right out of the gate through some of those quick pilots or that DFAT service Samuel just spoke to. Even some wins just during the implementation process, even before it's fully buttoned up. So that's what Algo is here to help support and try and help you guys get a win out of.
Yeah, so I think to put a bow on it and sum it up for this group, right? You don't need perfect data. Nobody has perfect data, and almost irrespective of your size of organization or the complexity of your systems, data readiness is a challenge for everybody. I can say with complete confidence that there are very few companies who walk through the door with their data optimized for AI, for forecasting, for leveraging in something like a control tower environment. It's just not a priority, even if you do have a really good data governance team. So, from that perspective, you just need structured data. You need data you can trust, and it has to be usable. And again, if you start small, you start with sort of your critical business lines. That's where you can start to see a force multiplier in terms of, at least I know I can trust this data, right? AI isn't a magic fix, it's a multiplier. And so it multiplies whatever foundation it sits on. And as I mentioned, earlier, a large conversation now is garbage in, garbage out, but AI is not, I think AI is pushing that conversation forward. But for anybody who's worked in an organization where you've tried to do big data, predictive analytics around your supply chain, your inventory, that's been a consistent issue ever since, we started to introduce more repositories of data, right? So digitization, while it's helped, has also created more data, which means, you need better data governance, better data structure, data hygiene, and ultimately, AI becomes, I think, kind of the bow on top that can sit above this. But if you have clean data, it's helping just from an operational perspective and purely from an analytics perspective to give you more confidence in your business. So, for the best path forward, in my opinion, and in our opinion, and sort of how we approach this with companies who don't have a lot of resources or haven't historically leveraged tools of this type, start small. Start with data that that you can get to a point where you can trust it, or facilitate workshops, bring in partners to help you get that data cleanliness, that data hygiene in place, and then make your forecast of that specific area wherever you choose to start sort of your trusted pilot or your beta, where you can sort of start to go out to your FP&A partners, to your business line partners, and create that culture of trust around a forecast. And that becomes the catalyst for broader adoption of that forecast within your business, and ultimately a better business planning S&OP operation. But it all starts with data.
Awesome. Thanks, Samuel. Yes, data, it's always at the heart of everything that we do, whether it's demand planning or really anything. So, Tom, I think, we had chatted about, a Q&A session. We're at 41 minutes in, which is great. We didn't have any questions drop in from the audience, but I threw a couple that we had into the chat, and I asked what data sources are hardest for you to reconcile today. Zohe replied saying promotion data for different retailers usually because it comes in so many different formats. I'm guessing, Tom, you see this every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes right back to our implementation, discovery, and data mapping sessions, right? We're providing a one-stop shop, easy to use template that can bring all that data into one spot. Yes, there's multiple ways the data looks from different retailers, but they all have the same aspects and elements on them that you need, and you don't need all of it, right? You pull a spreadsheet with your promotional information from a certain retailer, it might have 50 columns on it, and to truly run a model, you might need 7 of those columns. So Algo comes in and Algo makes it easy where we tell you what is required to run this model, map what is required. All this extra stuff you can ignore, or you can bring it in for this purpose in the future, but map these 7 columns that are required. So bring those into your ERP system, get them in one spot, one table in your system, and then that's the format that it can be passed to Algo. So it's all in one database in one area to be used for your modeling and your forecasting moving forward.
Great. Okay. And then, one question we had asked was how much manual effort goes into preparing your forecast? Well, I'm guessing, from our earlier conversation where there's, several individuals on teams and whole teams dedicated to maintaining manual demand planning processes. So we see it a lot, right? So I think too, I'd be curious to know, whether it's from the audience or in general. And we do a lot of surveys, by the way, just through our social feeds and asking, something like, are you considering any AI or automation with your demand planning? And if so, what's holding you back? Samuel or Tom, what do you see typically from our customers, with any resistance to AI processes? Is it just like fear of the unknown? We don't know what we don't know. Like, what are your thoughts there?
I'll go first and then turn it over to Tom for his thoughts as well. But, for me, it really goes back to trust, right? And so if your inventory data, your order management data historically has gaps or has, hygiene issues, things like that, and you try to, bring in a tool or go to a partner within your team, whether it's in the, the technology group or something like that, finance, and say, well, we're starting to build this forecast. It really comes back to the trust aspect, which is, well, I'm not going to trust what comes out of this AI tool if I don't trust the inventory, logic that's going into it, right? And so it's really foundational where, and people are very much aware of this. I think if you talk to people in different organizations, they know that their data quality isn't great. They know that they have gaps in their data. And so it just really slows down, I would say, that adoption that much further, because the willingness to adopt something like an AI solution is really predicated on, I think, trust within the business that the data that you're building the AI product off of is accurate.
Yeah, exactly. Any final thoughts there, Tom, before we call it a session?
No, I mean, I think Samuel said it great. And that's what we're here to help, right? That's why we go through the data validation sessions at the beginning of all this, giving some confidence that we've helped fill the gaps that Samuel just spoke to. Let's fill those gaps for those small wins so that you truly feel better about what you have before you have to look at an output of anything. So that's why this whole session is about that foundation of making sure you're happy with the quality of what's going in before you even have to look at what's coming out of the model. And so that's what we're here to help with.
Awesome. Okay, guys, I think we did very well. We covered the topic wholeheartedly. So thank you very much for your support and participation in this webinar today. And thank you to everybody who joined us and also several others who registered. So as always, this is a recorded session. We will share it out by email to everybody who did register, and it'll be found in our newsletter and our socials as well. So thank you very much, guys. I hope you have a great rest of day and week ahead, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Bye for now.